Welcome everybody to the 11th in the series of Artists Beyond the Studio, which is a series of Zoom lectures organised by Graphic Studio Dublin of artists during lockdown in 2021. For today's talk, I am pleased to introduce one of my art heroes, Gillian Lawler. Gillian is a Dublin-based painter and installation artist, originally from County Kildare. She graduated from NCAD and has exhibited widely in Ireland and internationally. She was the winner of the Hennessy Craig Award and the Whites Award at the RHA in 2007, and overall winner of the Open Selection Award at AIGSA in 2009. In 2019, she was awarded the Dublin City Council Graphic Studio Dublin Residency Award, and I had the pleasure of working with her then, where we made 2 pieces. Gillian's painting work depicts indefinite structures and sparse abandoned spaces that seem to inhabit another world. This world contains elements of the familiar, but here time, space, and existence seem altered. There are forms, shapes, and structures that hover within this space, inviting us to contemplate something that is perhaps just slightly out of reach, like a dream that is about to evade our consciousness. I'm intrigued by Gillian's paintings and the worlds that are suggested in them. Muted clouds, shadows, and reflections draw the viewer into a painting which is, on closer inspection, deeply layered with underpaintings, rubbed out, hidden, and then partially revealed once more on the canvas. She seems to be asking us to take a little time and delve a little deeper into these spaces, which reflect elements of our world. I hope Gillian will talk a bit about this in the context of her latest body of work. There are intangible realities which float near us, formless and without words, which was shown at the Molesworth Gallery in late 2020. I was delighted when Gillian was awarded the Dublin City Council Residency Award, as I've always thought that her paintings would lend themselves very well to print, with their layers of muted colours and soft ephemeral washes. We made 2 ambitious etchings on the residency, each one with 5 copper plates, combining hard ground line, aquatint, and spitbite. Gillian rose to the challenges of spitbite, a tricky process where acid is painted directly onto the plate, and created beautiful soft washes. Bright colours on the plate sit underneath veils of dusty greys and blues, so that only small glimpses of colour can be seen in the print. Gillian's visual language translates very well to printmaking, as there seem to be some similarities in process and methodology, which informed us while working on the prints. Gillian worked in layers, painstakingly building up elements of her image, scraping and burnishing to push back or remove parts of the drawing. And this process of concealing and revealing seems integral to both her prints and her paintings. I'm interested to hear how Gillian found the process and whether it has changed or influenced any elements of her painting practice. I will hand you over now to Gillian. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it.
Okay, Niamh, Robert, everyone. Thanks a million, Niamh, for that lovely introduction, and hi to everyone. So I'd like to start first of all with a little bit of background on myself. As Niamh said, I am from Kildare and I grew up on a farm. After secondary school, I went to NCAD and graduated from fine art painting in 2000. After college, myself and a group of artists started Brunswick Mill Studios, which we managed until 2008. I joined a number of group studios after this, including a residency at the RHA Gallery Studios in 2009, and eventually became a member of the Palace Project, where I have my current studio. I travelled widely within this time, including Mexico, Guatemala, Argentina, the US, Europe, and Asia. However, my journey to Nepal left a lasting impression and inspired much work following 2001. I was approached by the Cross Gallery upon leaving college and was represented by them until 2008. I have been represented by the Molesworth Gallery since 2015 and the Weber and Weber Gallery in Turin since 2019. I am a member of the artist group Difference Engine, who include Mark Cullen, Wendy Judge, and previously Jessica Foley. We have collaborated since 2009 and have exhibited all over Ireland, including Limerick City Gallery, West Cork Arts Centre, and Wexford Arts Centre, to name but a few. International shows include HDLU Zagreb, Oh No No Rotterdam, Oriel Meridian Gallery in Wales, and the CVS Cultural Centre in New York. So this slide is of me high up in the mountains of Nepal, traveling through the Khumbu Valley on my way towards Everest Base Camp. This experience had a huge influence on my subsequent work. with the mountain becoming a central motif in this work for nearly 10 years. Back in my studio in Dublin, I considered the idea of an urban mountain, and I superimposed the Nepali landscape onto the urban environment around me. The urban mountain became something aspirational, the want to find a connection to the natural world within an urban setting, and a vehicle for a reimagining of memories and experience. It also led to an interest in the idea of the sublime and the expression of the fearful and irregular forms of external nature. I'd also like to talk a little bit about my current work and my solo show, which followed at the Molesworth Gallery in 2020. My work is essentially about landscape, and within that, I want to explore the tension between what is real and imagined. In doing this, I explore my own unreliable recollections of anthropomorphic habitats, an accumulation of references of an imagined real as opposed to an actual real. I use abandoned places as backdrops, empty and laid bare, and these create a vista which allows me to imagine an alternative timeline or dimension. So these places are like systems in flux, uncertain, with many of the elements reduced and simplified. So since 2014, my work has been inspired by my visit to an abandoned coal mining town in Pennsylvania called Centralia. And that's just a slide of Centralia there. The work obliquely documented its post-industrial landscape and the forced abandonment of the town after a vein of coal deep below was set on fire in the 1960s. I first came across Centralia while reading A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, and I was immediately intrigued. And after some investigation, I wanted to go and see it in the flesh for myself. When I visited Centralia, most of the houses and infrastructure had been removed, and what remains now are sinkholes, mangled roadways, smouldering ventilation systems, overgrown streets, and a ghost town in many respects. These remaining features became reimagined elements within my work. And this slide here just shows, these are some slide images I took of Centralia while I was there. And afterwards, when I developed the slides, I drew and painted on the slides directly. So again, it highlighted my insertion of the imagined into a real world. The work I made for the Molesworth Gallery show drew on this previous work, but also became more concerned with ideas based on boundaries, edges, transitions, and transformations. In recent paintings, the canvas was split into two territories with a defined boundary line where forms crossed over, were transformed or dissolved or dispersed or absorbed. In many ways, it became a meditative space, allowing these changes to occur. I began to explore these ideas further while negotiating the grief I experienced upon the death of my mother in late 2017. These ideas on transformation and transition really resonated with the passing of my mother. And so as a result of this experience, I began to revisit my use of platforms and scaffolds and incorporate new forms based on paper airplanes, diving boards, and the bones of architectural structures. These elements are sometimes grounded, moving, suspended, tethered, hovering, unfolding, and at other times, standing apart from the landscape. These forms for me describe the journey that myself and my mother took while she was passing away, and the loss, the release, and the acceptance I felt over the following years. Elements like the platform embodied that moment when my mother moved from this world to the next, representing her body in transition. It became a place of energy where the veil between this world and the next becomes thin and exposed. It captures an ephemeral quality, a fleeting moment which bears witness to a momentary leap of faith, and is suggestive of this inner world situated between the conscious and unconscious. So these ideas flowed into the making of work for my solo show at the Molesworth Gallery. There are intangible realities which float near us, formless and without words. This show opened on the 5th of March 2020. I exhibited 15 paintings and one hanging sculpture which hung from the ceiling in the front room of the gallery. The following week, the exhibition closed due to the first lockdown. So very uncertain times, but I was happy the show had opened and had a brief public viewing. The exhibition stayed in the gallery until May 2020. During this time, and while the gallery was closed, I had a film made of the exhibition, which I'd love to show you. As most of you did not get to see the exhibition as it was closed, this film gives a lovely overview of the hang and shows details of the work which are hard to see via photograph. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to come out of this, and I'm just going to show you the film. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see that? Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'm going to start. So it's just under 7 minutes long. So Okay, thanks everyone. That's that video. So I'm just going to go back into Sorry there, guys. I'm just going to go back into my slide presentation. Bear with me again for a minute. Okay, so everyone can see that?
Yep, there we go again.
Robert. Okay, so yeah, I really wanted to show that video, as I said, because most people didn't get to see the exhibition, but it just in terms of just being able to see the detail and, as I said, the texture. I find sometimes with my work, just photographically, it kind of flattens it a little bit, and it's harder to see the subtleties. So I hope that video gave you kind of just a better overview. But from that show now, I've chosen a few paintings from the exhibition, and I'd like to talk about them a little bit more individually. So, okay. So this first painting is called Transition, and it's an oil on canvas, 70 by 50 centimeters. So this painting is composed of a number of platforms which are hanging vertically. One is a little more detailed with a checkerboard surface, and they all hang close to each other. I poured washes of subtle colour, pinks, blues, yellows, and greens over the forms, and as the washes drained away, a clear ovoid area formed at the top, which to me resembled a portal. This painting embodies a quietness, stillness, and acceptance, the embracing of transition, change, and moving on. This next painting is called Platform and is also an oil on canvas. And the platform embodies the essence of my mother's form as it transforms and transcends. It slowly moves upwards, and in doing so, the subtle image of an entity coming into bloom appears. I was thinking of the use of the lily during a wake and how this flower opens upon the passing of a person's life. This painting is called Camouflage, and it's also an oil on canvas. And in this painting, a simplified structure emerges within a still and quiet landscape. The checkerboard pattern attempts to camouflage the structure, diverting the attention away from what lies beneath. A residue, or perhaps the memory of another structure, is slowly becoming visible along the bottom half of the canvas. This painting is called Transition 2, and it also uses pattern, line, and form. The prominent form is based on a paper airplane as it takes its brief journey across an imagined landscape. I wanted to use the paper airplane as a motif for the ephemeral nature of our own journeys through life. Within these ideas, I used the lines as an attempt to hold onto aspects of this journey, an attempt to pin down a fleeting moment. I also like that these lines could be tethering lines and are holding a distant memory in place. The pattern also resembles a structure with open windows, letting something out or allowing something to pass through. This painting is called Transition 1 and is loosely based on the image of a paper airplane also, as it meets the boundary between two worlds. The painting is split between two territories. A subtle blue on the top half meets a slightly darker shade of the same blue. The darker section is more textured and when viewed in the flesh takes on elements of structural patterns. As the paper airplane begins to cross, its tip on meeting the boundary line begins to transform or dissolve. This painting is called Platform 2, and it uses the simplified form of a high diving board as it hangs over an uncertain landscape. It feels like it could float away, but is tethered to something beyond the bottom of the canvas, A very subtle shade of iridescent green flows from the top of the diving board to the bottom of the canvas. In doing some research rather, I came across an article on Renaissance painters who were wary about using the color green in their work. It was believed that the color was a bridge between this world and the next, and it was advised to use it sparingly as it had a particular power. My use of green in this case alludes to the bridge between two spirit worlds. So this painting is called Platform 3, and this painting deals with similar ideas as in the previous painting. Again, a platform or diving board hangs in mid-air. A subtle structural form can be seen emerging from the landscape in the distance. The dusky pinks, yellows, and greys add to the sense of the unknowable. And this is Platform 2. This painting depicts a platform slowly moving beyond the limits of its place. Again, it embodies the spirit of my mother transcending her form and finding peace and stillness. I've used this image many times in previous work, where the form moves slowly in a particular direction, leaving residues or after images behind. Again, the use of green describes the connection between two different worlds. This painting is called Transition 5 and depicts a structural form which sits on the horizon of an imagined landscape. Most of the structure is buried underneath. However, the subtle bones of its architecture, almost like scaffolding, are slightly visible. The structure above ground resembles two open doors, out of which something is released. Above these doors hovers an after image, echoing the checkerboard pattern. So this was the only sculpture in the exhibition, and it's called Tower, and it hung from the ceiling among the paintings in the front room of the gallery. The sculpture is 120 centimeters long and is made of welded plate steel. The surface is painted with an undulating checkerboard surface, which creates the illusion of movement, anti-perspective, and a shimmering of color, depending on where you are standing. This piece was originally made for a difference engine exhibition, which took place in Zagreb at the HDLU exhibition space in 2018. The form is based on a number of previous paintings, which described an elongated pyramidal structure which balanced precariously on one of its pointed ends, or at times was hung from a line. It describes an imagined architectural form within an empty landscape, quiet and still. I thought it would be an interesting element within the Molesworth show, bringing the imaginary element into the real space of the gallery. So this slide shows an image of, again, the sculpture Tower, hanging about 20 feet high off a balcony, which overlooks the gallery space at HDLU Zagreb. This gallery is in the round and is one of the most dramatic spaces I've ever seen. The stillness of the sculpture and the vastness of the space work really well together. So I'd like to talk a little bit more now about my residency, my Dublin City Council Residency Award, graphic print, and my invitation as a visiting studio artist also. So here I am with Niamh. I was really delighted to receive the Print Award and Visiting Artist invitation in 2019. And here I am with Niamh, who was so inspiring and knowledgeable throughout the whole experience. I had done a couple of print modules while I was at college, but I really had very little experience or know-how coming to graphic studio. So I was so excited and really eager to learn more. And as Niamh said, as she said in her introduction, for a long time, I also had been thinking about printmaking and considering how my work could translate via the printing process. So at my initial meeting with Neve, we agreed to make 2 prints, which were 45 by 50 centimeters in size, based on 2 paintings of mine from 2018, Plantation and Relocation. Both prints used 5 plates, 5 plates each, so were technically, as Neve said, ambitious. They had lots of pattern and gradiated color to consider. Neve introduced me to many processes, including spit bite, aquatint, etching, stopping out, all of which I thoroughly enjoyed and made me very aware of some of the similarities of process I use in my own painting. I use many thin layers of paint when building up the surface, incorporating washes and forms which echo the process of inking the plates and layering the printed area of color, line and form. I use oily washes of pigment between layers that I rub back with a cloth or press with tissue paper. The oil after rubbing reveals marks and traces of underpainting. I really enjoyed using spit bite, particularly as a technique. I also use paint strippers to strip away areas of paint, and I like the organic nature of how the acid eats into harder or softer areas, just as it does in printmaking. I enjoy how the printing process slows you down and allows you to consider each mark you make on the plate. It is much more technical, however, it was still great to see that there was still room for happy accidents here and there. Graphic Studio has amazing facilities, and there's such a warm and welcoming sense of community there. And it was great to see how supportive everyone was and how much help each artist offered each other. And then, of course, all the lovely chats we all had over a cup of tea in the kitchen. I really enjoyed that also. So, as an influence of my time at Graphic Studio, I began to think about how I could incorporate some printing techniques directly into my practice. I bought some soft cut lino and cutting tools and decided using a basic printing method to create pattern on my canvases was a good place to start. Painting pattern can be very time consuming, so printing directly onto the surface as a first or secondary layer got the work moving really fast. So this shows the very early stages of making new painting, where I have printed the pattern using the lino block directly onto the surface of the canvas. Later, as I paint layers, this pattern will subtly emerge through the layers of paint. So, so just some upcoming projects. I have a solo exhibition at the Weber and Weber Gallery in Turin, which is curated by Valeria Sergini. That's coming up this December, and it will close in February 2022. And again, this show will also develop ideas from the Molesworth show. And it's predominantly a painting show. I won't have any sculpture in this show. And then the next project I have is going to be an exhibition curated by Rebecca Sitar, who is an artist, curator, and is also senior lecturer at Manchester School of Art. So we have lots of crossovers in our work. So we're at the moment doing lots of Zoom meetings and coming up with some ideas and titles. And again, dates and venues for this project will be announced towards the end of the year. So hopefully something in early 2022. And then finally, just where you can get some more information on my work. And again, if you want to see the film, my websites, Molesworth, Gallery Weber, and Difference Engine. So that's it, folks. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Gillian. That was marvelous. It really was.
So I'm just curious as to, I guess, how you start your paintings. For me, they have such an emotional charge, and I'm just wondering, do they start with like a really specific plan, or do they start with a feeling, or like how do they come about?
definitely not a specific plan. I kind of have ideas, and I sometimes use sketchbooks. I don't always, but particularly maybe with pattern, I might kind of sketch it out a little bit if I want to just see how it looks, but not initially. I kind of use the canvas as just kind of an experimental type of place to start off with. So I will put down lots of washes of color. I play around with pattern, line, different forms, and if I rework them, I paint them out, I rework them. So it's a very laborious kind of process. But so things that work, I leave in. Things that don't work, I leave out. So again, it's quite instinctual. I have things floating around in my head, ideas floating around in my head, but it is initially quite instinctual. And I don't use reference material per se. I don't have photographs in front of me, so it is very much about thinking about things I've seen. Memory. Instinct is a big part to play in it from the start.
And do the sculptures ever come first, or do they come second? Where do they fit in with it?
I think they come second. Yeah, the painting kind of brings the ideas into reality, I suppose. So the sculpture definitely is kind of inspired by the painting. So yeah, as I said, that once tower was a direct influence on, or direct inspiration from, a couple of paintings I did in 2018. So yeah, they came directly from that.
Gillian, may I ask you a question about the patterned objects on horizons? I'm just wondering if you were ever aware of the Dazzle Ship paintings of the Second World War, Edward Wadsworth or Arthur Lister.
No, Kieran, no, I'm not. Maybe I've seen them. I'm not. I can't recall them now. But yeah, what are they like?
Well, I mean, they were essentially a World War II camouflage, or World War I camouflage, actually, for ships. But there's an astonishing resonance between your images and what those Dazzle ships look like.
Oh, fantastic!
So just worth having a look at. I just was struck by the similarities of the.
Yeah, I'll definitely. Yeah, thanks, Kieran. I'll definitely have a look. Yeah, I like the idea that this pattern. I've used checkerboard quite a bit over the years. Actually, I'd say for the last 10 years, on and off. And again, I like the idea that it is kind of almost a bit like a camouflage, and it can, it can change, a flat surface from, that undulating. It can create kind of such movement, within a flat surface. So I've always kind of been interested. I've always been really intrigued by just that basic black and white pattern. But yeah, as a vehicle for camouflage within the last show, I suppose maybe it was about me, my emotional kind of response to the work, or maybe just, as I said, trying to kind of conceal that in some kind of way, not make it too obvious.
And do you mind if I ask as well, the themes that you explore now, were they similar before your mother passed away, or were you doing something different before that?
They were very similar, Kieran. They were very, very similar. I've always been interested in the edges of things, and as I said, things that kind of change, and more interdimensions. I'm kind of interested in science, where science and art kind of meets as well. So I've always been interested in the real and imagined, and how in your head it kind of all seems to be kind of in the very moment, in that very moment, or the present moment. So those kind of ideas were always a part of the work. So I suppose when my mother died, it kind of naturally kind of slipped into that space. So, which for me just really helped with the grieving process. And it was a very calming and kind of healing experience, actually. So
they're profoundly beautiful, and they do really induce that sense of respectful mourning.
Thank you, Kieran. Thanks very much. Yeah. As I said, I don't make things too obvious, so it wasn't a subtle way for me to kind of deal with, particularly the first and second year after my mother died. So yeah, it just was a perfect vehicle for kind of a type of healing, you know. So
well,
yeah,
you do her great honor.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Yeah, I'd hope so. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? How are you doing, Susan?
You've built up a very, very strong professional practice over the last number of years. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice to artists who are kind of building up from a let's say, an earlier level. What kind of advice could you give?
I think when I left college, when you leave college, it's obviously really daunting. It's, you know, you don't know where to start. But when I set up a group studio with a number of artists from college, like creating a group of like, particularly college friends was a great way to kind of get started. So we were really lucky to find a space, a large space up in Stony Batter. And we divided it up in studios, and we stayed there for about 8 years. But it was just great having, you know, those people around every single day to kind of give you kind of to bounce ideas off of, and just have that kind of support, you know. And I think that was a good way to start, you know. But I know it's completely different now because it's much harder to find space. It's much harder to kind of rent. Rent is just so much more expensive. But for me, that was a great starting point. So the group studio, like we were more or less there every day. I was also very, very lucky that the Cross Gallery did approach me on my degree show, basically, and asked me to do a group show the following year. So that was kind of a lucky break. But I think, I think, Susan, getting together as a group, with you know, like-minded people, and using that kind of support structure is really important. And then of course sending out, you know, apply for absolutely everything, and get used to getting lots of knockbacks and rejections and everything. But I think applying to everything, open submission shows, even international open submission shows, I think are really good ways of getting your work out there. Having a good website, you know, all of these things weren't necessarily a thing when I left college. It's about 20 years ago, which is a long time now. But yeah, you know, social media is such an amazing thing. You know, Instagram, I haven't been on it for too long, but it's fantastic. I think as a visual artist, it's great, like, to just get your work up there and see. So yeah, I think keeping connected to kind of plenty of like-minded people, and not unlike like graphic print, you know, it's amazing to have those supports there, and to see people are regular, and have a regular studio practice is also, I think, really important too. Yeah. So a little bit of all those things, I think, Susan.
You work in Palace a lot. You're very involved with Palace projects, and
right.
I'm wondering, like, I presume obviously part of that is that it's a job, and I presume it takes you away from your practice a little bit.
Yeah.
But are there any elements of it that you find feed into your work, like, I guess, the connection with the artists there, or?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I have a studio in Palace, but I'm also the studio manager, so I manage the rental of the spaces. So yeah, it's really nice to meet kind of younger artists coming in, and I'm always kind of up for giving them a little bit of advice here and there. They're always picking my brains about things. So yeah, that's kind of really nice thing to do, and just to see how they kind of develop, and, you know, and then particularly with the gallery in Palace as well, like that's kind of, it's just like an amazing resource, and it's great to see what's going on there, you know, every month. Well, pre-pandemic, of course, but there was so much exciting stuff going on there, and there was great opportunity then to meet even artists coming in to exhibit there. Yeah, I think it's a nice break. It's nice to get out of your studio, out of your head a bit, and just see other people's work.
Well, thanks a million, and thanks everybody. Next week we have the lovely Niamh McGuinn. Thanks a million.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.